In this episode, I am speaking with Howard Waldstreicher. He is the author of Facebook's Oldest Intern, How a 60-year-old fitness trainer reinvented himself with the most unlikely of companies. This is a fascinating story of how Howard, who was totally screwed in the pandemic as a gym owner and fitness trainer, picked himself up and revived a previous career and get hired at Facebook at the age of 60. Cue the music.
Welcome to the Repurpose Your Career podcast, brought to you by Career Pivot. This podcast is where those of us in the second half of life come together to discuss how to repurpose our careers for the 21st century. Come listen to career experts give you proven strategies. Listen to people like you tell their stories on how they repurpose their careers. And finally, get your questions answered. Your host, Mark Miller, has made 6 career pivots over the last 30 years. He understands this is not about jumping out of the frying pan into a fire, but rather to create a plan where you make clear, actionable steps or pivots to a better future career. Are you ready to repurpose your career?
Welcome to episode 314 of the Repurpose Your Career podcast. My name is Mark Miller. I'll be your host every Monday for discussion on what it's like to repurpose your career. In this episode, I'm speaking with Howard Waldstreicher. He is the author of Facebook's Oldest Intern, How a 60-year-old fitness trainer reinvented himself with the most unlikely of companies. This is a fascinating story of how Howard, who was totally screwed in the pandemic as a gym owner and a fitness trainer, picked himself up and revived a previous career and get hired at Facebook at the age of 60. Here's how Howard describes himself on his Amazon author page. Call him what you will, a gadfly, a shortie, or a squeaky-voiced Texas cowboy, but I had a blast working for Ross Perot. At the age of 26, this Queens boy got his first real job as a computer programmer for Perot's electronic data systems in Plano, Texas. I liked the structure and the dress code. Wingtip shoes, blue and gray suits, short haircuts, and conservative ties. In fact, if you dared to visit the bathroom without your jacket, it was grounds for termination. These days, things are a little bit different. At 60, 61 now, I stumble out of bed, throw on some sweatpants, and meander to my desk. No one cares if I've brushed my hair, if I've showered, even have pants on. After all, I work at Facebook. Wait, it's meta now. Well, that's what the millennials tell me. They help me with a lot of stuff that I don't know since I'm the oldest employee at the office. Definitely top 3. Thing is, despite the fact that it's an alter universe from Perot's clean-cut company, I'm absolutely freaking loving it. I landed the job after a 20-year hiatus from the information technology world, during which I ran a fitness center, was a tennis instructor, and had a family. So not only did I leave my field, I left the world of having to answer to a boss at all. My adult kids thought my new gig was cool. No other employer would even speak to me about a job at my age. This episode is sponsored by the Career Pivot community, but more on that later. Now, on to my discussion with Howard Waldstreicher. Welcome to the Repurpose Your Career podcast. I have a real interesting guest. I have Howard Waldstreicher, who is the oldest intern ever at Facebook. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Mark. Thanks for having me.
You just published a book. Its name is
Facebook's Oldest Intern. It's basically the story of how a 60-year-old fitness trainer, reinvented himself with the most unlikely of companies.
Well, when I read the book, it really resonated because my last tech startup, I came in my 50s. I was surrounded by young people, some of which I did fine with, particularly the guys. And I had a real challenge with the young women. I tended to offend them. Anyway, so Howard, what did you do in the first half of life?
My first half, when I graduated college, I started with Ross Perot and EDS. Right? I was classically trained as a programmer. Did that for a number of years. Loved it there. I mean, if you went to the bathroom, this is the way it was set up there. Right? So if you went to the bathroom without your jacket on, it was grounds for termination. If your tie was too loud, you had to go across the street and get another one. I mean, it was strictly blue, gray suits, wingtips, no facial hair, right? You can have a mustache, but it had to be very neatly trimmed. There was a barber in the basement. One time, if your hair got too long, you'd have to get a cut. So that was the type of company there. But I loved it. I mean, it was, I'm a structured guy and I fit in well with that. And then after a number of years, if you remember, the dot-com implosion happened. Of course, I was affected by that. And then I always had this passion of fitness. I was a fitness guy. I was a competitive tennis player. I played basketball. I had this idea and I opened up a gym. It was called Half Hour Power. I did that for like 20 years. And I had the opportunity of training and working with some of the top athletes in the world. In fact, I even did a demo at the University of Georgia with Serena Williams. I also trained Wes Welker when he played for the Broncos, DeMarcus Ware, and a number of others. And I even did a workout video with the #1 doubles team of all time, the Bryan brothers. So things were going well with me. I had a couple of studios going already. And I also was putting it into the big box gyms, right? And it was awesome. Everything was going great. But everything was going great until the pandemic. The pandemic hits, and I'm like, oh man, what am I going to do here? I tried to ride it out, right, with people coming in, but as as everyone knows, you couldn't do it. I was still paying rent. People weren't coming. What am I going to do? I had no choice. I had to shut it down. So I shut it down. Now what am I going to do? I mean, I'm 60 years old. What am I going to do? What do I know other than fitness? I know I was techie. I was a computer programmer. I worked with databases and programming languages. So I thought, all right, let me get my skills up. Because look, I don't care what it is. I was classically trained. The stuff today it's the same as what I was taught years ago. The only thing different is the language, right? I mean, that's basically it. So I took some courses, right? Udemy and DataCamp, for example. I thought, let me get my skills up here. So it came back slowly, but I was getting it up. I was like, I don't want to be a programmer because I think I was too old for that. And I don't know if I can compete with those younger kids that did it all night long. I thought, all right, what about data analyst, data science, data engineer? Those were the new jobs. I started sending out resumes. I mean, I sent out tons and nothing, absolutely nothing. Then I found this interesting website and it was called iRelaunch. So what it is it's for people that are relaunching back into the workforce, which means you had to be out of the workforce for at least 2 years. It didn't mean you had to be working. You could have been taking care of a sick relative, for example, or you could have been opened up a business. Now, this relaunch program, it actually started, it was for women, right? Someone from IBM actually started it. And they were like, we have a great resource here, with the women that, took time off to raise a family. Let's get them back in the workforce. Well, now they opened it up to everyone. So I started applying for that. And I had connections, right? My cousin was the chief medical officer at Johnson & Johnson, and they had a return to work program I applied to. I actually talked to some people. I looked them up on LinkedIn, right? I was always proactive. And the first thing they asked me was, are you related to Joanne, who was my cousin? Yes. So I thought that'd be in my favor. Nothing. Then Moody's, we had a connection with the CFO. Of course, he had the person in charge of the return to work program email me right away. But after that, nothing. And on and on. I mean, I was getting, as you can imagine, I was getting depressed. What am I going to do? And I'll never forget this. Mark. I mean, I was lying in bed on a Sunday morning and I was just looking at my phone. My wife asked me, what are you doing? What do you think I'm doing? You know what I'm doing. I'm looking through the phone. I'm looking at job stuff here. And I said, there's one from Facebook. And I have, 2 of the 7 things that they would like. But, come on, Facebook, there's no way they're going to bring me on. And my wife, with her encouragement, said, apply. And like my mother always told me, she said, look, nothing ventured, nothing gained, right? That was one of her famous quotes. And it only takes one. So if I don't do it, I won't know. So I applied. The next day, I got an email. They'd like to interview me. Oh, man, I was ecstatic just for that. And so I get on the phone, talking with the recruiter. She asked me a few technical questions. Thank God I was preparing, so I answered them, easily, very simply. And we moved on to the next step. Now, the next step was going to be the interview, right? So now the interview for Facebook is very interesting. Now, as you know, of course, it was on the Zoom, and you have 5 questions on programming and 5 questions on the database. And you have 25 minutes to answer 5 questions for each one. So you have to move quick. right? It's like 5 minutes per question. And it was taking me forever to solve these problems that I was practicing. As you get older, my brain it's not a young brain anymore. I used to be like a superstar programming. I would do things like that. So things were taking me a little while, but I was still able to do it. So the time comes, I was so nervous. I mean, I swear, if you asked me 2 + 2, I would have used my fingers. I was shaking. I don't know why. It just was. And the guy's looking at me. First question comes on, totally blank. I just froze. I couldn't believe it. All that preparation. But he was nice. He kind of walked me through it, and I gradually was able to do it. And I took a breath, and I got more comfortable, and I went through that okay. Then I got to the programming part, and look, I was Googling stuff. I was really preparing, and some of the questions they asked, I kind of already knew because they were in the Google there. So I did much better on the programming part. But I wasn't still sure that I did what they wanted, because they say you have to get like 4 out of 5 in each one to make it through. So I wait. Of course, I'm telling my wife everything. And I'm like, oh, God, you know how that goes, right? When you're waiting for something. And then the next day, they're very quick. They didn't wait that long. I get an email. We'd like to move forward with you. I couldn't, oh my God, right? If I was determined then, I was doubly determined, because this would be the final one. I said, yes. And they pushed me out. I said, I need to go out as far as I can so I can prepare. So that was like 3 weeks they gave me to prepare. Told me what would be on it, and I get ready. And I took, so they have these, not courses, but people that will give you like mock interviews that worked for Facebook. So I took advantage of that for the behavioral questions, tell me a time when blah, 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 and some of the technical questions. I worked with that, kept studying. I mean, every single day I was back in training. I did it. I'm very disciplined, and I believe you need to be disciplined and do it. I don't care if it's an hour or 2, whatever it is, something every day. I did it 7 days a week. I prepared for that. Then came the interview. 4 hours, right? 4 hours comes on. First one is technical. And, it clicked with me. It was kind of like I had to do something about it. I had to create another Uber system based off the Uber system. I had to do like this data model, and they would ask me all these questions, and I was able to answer them. Next was the behavioral. And this guy kind of threw me for a loop. I was like, where are these questions coming from? I mean, that he was asking me. I mean, on and on and on. So I was like, okay, I did all right with that. Then I had a technical again. Again, I kind of got it, right? Then the last one came, and I wasn't getting it. I had no clue. And I can hear it in my interviewer's voice. He was getting frustrated. I mean, I was this close. I was this close, like an inch away from just saying, this isn't for me, man. Forget about it. Because I was frustrated. So that ended. And of course, you go to take your shower afterwards, like, and it was at the end of the day. And then, in the shower and relax, I'm like, oh, God, I know how to do it now. So I went back to my computer and I did it because I remembered the question. And of course, I had it there. So I was like, I had it in the bag. I thought, oh, God, I had it. One day goes by, maybe 2. The next night, I get a call. Now, I didn't answer the phone because I usually don't. I listened to the voicemail, and the recruiter said she'd like to speak to me. Oh, okay, well, are you telling me I didn't get it? Why are you calling me? I call her the next day. She says, Howard, you were very interesting. This has never happened before. You had 2 really strong hires, the ones I did really well on. One was, can go either way. And one was very weak, do not hire. But, in the pandemic, we have unusual circumstances. We'd like to make you an offer. I couldn't believe it. I almost fell off. Not only an offer, but a sign-on bonus as well. I mean, I walked in the kitchen and told my wife and my mother-in-law happened to be there what they were going to pay me and a sign-on bonus. I didn't have to think about it. Yes, I'm there. So that's the return to work now.
This episode is sponsored by the Career Pivot membership community. The Career Pivot membership community is a group of people from all over the U.S. and Canada with diverse backgrounds. This is a community where everyone is there to help everyone else out figure out what they want to do in the second half of life and then make it happen. Many have made changes that they did not know existed or was possible when they came to the community. They learn from each other and broaden their horizons on what was really possible. Let's hear what Alec had to say about the community.
Well, you can't underestimate the value of community, right? To start this transition in my life and to be able to connect with others who were going through it, who had maybe perhaps made the same missteps that I had made, right? Or to the extent to which I could learn from them and not make certain mistakes or share my experience. It really just was a very giving place for me to share information, laugh about the highs and lows, and get information from other people who were interested in my story as much as I was interested in hearing about theirs.
You can't just join the community. I bring people into the community every few months in groups. You can sign up for the waiting list, so when I open the door for new members, you'll be notified. If you're interested in learning more about the endeavor and sign up for the waiting list, please go to careerpivot.com/community. Now, back to the episode. I've had Carol Fishman Cohen on the podcast, who runs Ivory Lunch. You got an offer, and obviously it was Facebook, and the money was good because Facebook pays really well. This was for a remote job?
Originally, you had to pick a place to go. You either had to pick Seattle or Menlo Park if you got hired on. So the return to work portion would be remote. Then if you get hired on, you would go to whichever spot you picked. But of course, that all changed.
What did they hire you to do?
So they hired me as a data engineer. Now, the interesting thing, Mark, is in this return to work program, you're in a cohort, right? They really want you to succeed. They're set up very well, and they set it up for you to succeed without question. Now, I was the only male in the return out of 13 of us, the only male. And more interestingly, I was the only American born, which I thought was, okay, all right. But I had the most, I guess you would say, personality. I mean, I'm a talker. A lot of these people, they were brilliant, but they were very quiet. I'm in as a data engineer. Now, I never did that before, but I had a programming background. You get on, you have a mentor, right? You have a mentor, you have a buddy, which, by the way, my buddy was supposedly in the return to work program as well. I said, he looked kind of young. And I was like, how old are you? He was 32. I go, 32? You're in the return to work. All right. My mentor is 26. And then I have my manager, and everyone was great. You meet everybody and they train you. And so what I did was I had to extract, for example, I was on the newsfeed team. So the newsfeed is where it's the main place where you put in posts. So I did what we call the meaningful social interactions. And what that means is if you put a post in, let's say you put one word, okay, that's worth a certain number of points. Maybe you gave it a like, that's another number of points. Maybe you gave 5 words or more. That's another number of points. And that's how they rank it. And that's how the algorithm worked. So I would extract data to show all this. And then I would create what we called visualizations, dashboards, line charts, bar charts, whatever they needed for the data scientists to look at. And the executives, Zuckerberg looks at those all the time. And that's how they would make decisions to get, we wanted more eyes on the product. That was my day-to-day job. It's in technical terms, I was maintaining and creating data pipelines. And then in turn, I created visualizations. Now, the interesting thing here is it's only their tools. They created all their own tools. You can't Google anything. You have to ask and try. It was crazy. But like I said, people there are brilliant. They figure it out, and you just search and you figure out what you have to do. So we have we have an orientation at first. Okay, it comes up, and they broke us into groups of 10. And we all come up, like in typical Zoom in the box, and there's people just staring at each other, and I just can't stand that. So right away, I took the lead and I said, "Hey, hi everyone, I'm Howard. I'm going to be a data engineer. I'm in the return to work program. Can we go around? What do you do?" So I kind of took charge of that. But we were also tasked with we had to answer. I can't remember the question, but they wanted us to go in order of the month you were born. They just threw something out to do it. But again, nothing. So I took the lead. I just took control and said, all right, who's born in January? No one? Okay, February. No one? March? Oh, I'm February. All right, go ahead. Tell us about yourself. So that's how that worked. And then even on our initial team meetings, again, people were very quiet. Now, Mark, some of it might be, like there we have, Asians, Indians, and it just might be but they're just quiet in general, right? Compared to me, I'm a loud New Yorker. I'm older, right? So I'm not afraid to say what I'm thinking. I feel I kind of helped them in that regard. Is like, hey, Howard's talking. Let's, and I would pull stuff out of them.
How long was the internship?
So the return to work program was 16 weeks. Interesting enough, during the return to work program, I had, as you know, I had a gym, I had a couple of studios there. I teach as a guest trainer at a place called Rancho La Puerta, which is a spa in Mexico, in Tecate. And I was scheduled to go down one of the weeks during my internship. And I asked my manager, can I go? And they were more than happy to let me go. So I had that week off, but I was still responsible for getting done what I had to get done. Now, Mark, not everything what I'm going to tell you, not everything is in the book that I'm going to tell you right here. So I had a mentor I told you to start with. He left. He quit after a couple of weeks. And I wasn't doing anything. We had our cohort and we had our little group meetings. I kept asking, what are you guys working on? Really? What are you doing? Really? You doing that? I'm not doing anything. How come they're not giving me anything? And so he quit. So they had a whole thing to go around. They had to get me another mentor. So I lost a month of doing anything. And then this next mentor, set stuff up for me. And then I worked through it. And to make a long story short, you had to do a final project at the end. Everything was built on this final project. So I did it all. And I mean, to be honest with you, it was fairly easy. It really was. I don't know, maybe they just weren't giving me some hard stuff, but I caught on pretty quick with what I had to do. And then you had to give a presentation. I gave a great presentation. I'm good at that. I was listening to these other presentations. Like I said, their communication skills aren't that good, and they get they can't talk. So that's something that I think they need to work on with people. So I gave a presentation, and then I was waiting. Then I'm waiting to see if I was going to get hired. But during all this, you had the opportunity to get a professional coach to help you. What do you call it? When you don't believe you can, imposter syndrome. That's huge. I kept thinking to myself, why am I, God, my God, these people, why am I here? So I had that, and I got a coach, and we would talk it through. So I was getting better and better and better because I kept talking with my wife, who was getting sick of me telling her everything that was going on. She would talk with me, came to the end, and now I'm waiting because that was it. All right, am I going to get it or not? And I met with my manager every single week, right? We had, one-on-ones to see what you're working on. I would always ask him, any red flags? How am I doing? I haven't heard anything. You're doing great. Okay. Then all of a sudden we have this one meeting that he says, well, we're not sure you can use the tools. You have habits already formed. I'm like, where is this coming from? You never mentioned this to me before. How come all of a sudden I'm hearing this? Well, and then he didn't really say much. So we had to wait 3 days. So I'm just hanging around, just waiting, really. That third day comes. I get a text from him. Right? Everything was text. No one emails. You email a little bit. For the most part, it's text if you want someone to look at it. So then I said right away, as soon as I saw him, I was just like, don't torture me. Yes or no? And that's when he smiled and he said, congratulations. I'd like to offer you a position as a data engineer. I was like, ecstatic. But, and there's always a but, isn't there? I wouldn't be on the same team. They had to find me another team because he felt the only position he had was a senior data engineer, and he didn't want me to set me up for failure. Okay, is that right? Didn't he want that, or he didn't want me on his team? They wanted to keep me? I don't know. But I was a full-time, and let me tell you, I got a kick out of telling everyone that I worked for Facebook, a full-time data engineer. What the reactions would be? You work there? Really? It was shocked.
You got hired. So where'd you go next?
So now I go to another part of the newsfeed team. And now I have a different mentor, new manager, and new stuff, to work on. I started working on with the avatars and a whole bunch of other things. That started off, a little harder now, right? Because you got through that. So, but actually, let me back up. Excuse me. Before that, after the internship, you go into they have their boot camp that every new hire has to go into. Doesn't matter. You could be the vice president of whatever. Everyone goes to the boot camp. So you have to go to the boot camp. And the boot camp is where you learn their stuff more, even though I knew some of it already. So it was a little bit of boring, I will admit. What happens, the way it works is teams try to woo you to go onto their team, right? Hey, this guy looks great. Let me bring him on our team, blah, blah, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm like, okay, who the hell is going to want me on their team? So the head guy who was in charge of the return to work program, he said, Howard, let me find someone. I want you to have a mentor. Right, we want you to succeed. Let's keep you on this stable team so you can do that, you'd be all right. So a couple of months went by. I mean, I had nothing. I had really, to be honest, I had nothing to do. And so then he found me my team, and then I went on and this other with the news feed, and it was great from there. I mean, the work was challenging. I had a great mentor who would give me a ton of stuff. He would write the steps for me what to do, and then if I had to do it again, I forgot. I'd tell him. I said, I need. It takes me a while. He'd expect me to remember it right away and do it, and fast. He wanted it done fast. But he gave up on that after a while. I mean, I'm old school. I would write stuff down, pen and paper. And then we went from there. But we got along great, and I got along with every single person there. Everyone.
So who were you working with? What was the demographics?
The demographics was all over the place. I mean, because Facebook has gotten a little bit older now, right? So the manager was maybe 32. You had young and old. You had anywhere from, I would say the youngest on the team was probably 24. Right, like a year or two out of college, something like that. Well, I was the oldest, obviously, but after me was my mentor, actually, who was, I think, just turned 40 or was going to be 40. So there was always a big disparity. But the bigger problem, Mark, was the fact that I haven't touched this stuff in so long.
Yeah.
And to get back, I never even answered to a boss when I was the boss. Now I have to listen to what everyone says. But, the manager was really cool. It's like you manage your own schedule. You're in charge of it. And that's the way it worked.
Now, you were still working completely remote.
Completely remote. In my basement, completely remote.
And how was that for you, being a person who's used to being out and about?
If I was younger, I probably wouldn't have liked it. I think the younger kids need to get into the office and be around people. Myself, I loved it. I mean, I had the freedom to go and do what I needed to do. As long as I got my work done, it didn't matter.
So when did you get hired?
April of 2021, I was the intern. That's when I became the oldest intern. I got hired, when he gave me the full-time position in September. And that's when I got, that's when you get everything. I got all the great benefits and the stock and this and that. In fact, when I had my first review now, right? So I'm hired there. I worked there for almost a year. I did everything right, but man, the way they do it there is rough. Here's how they do it. The managers have to sell you. So they brought me in we called an IC4. That's an independent contributor. That's what they call it. So I'm compared with all the other independent contributors, all the other IC4s from all the different teams, and they only have a certain number that can meets all, redefines expectations, etc. So you have to go above and beyond because they compare you with everyone. So they gave me. The first thing I said to him was, I should get a redefines expectations. And of course they laughed. I said, well, let me tell you why. I said, I'm not really joking. I said, who else do you have to compare me with? Nobody. I know this guy here. I mean, come on. Well, blah, blah, blah. So they gave me the meets most. And then I waited a little bit. And I was like, so am I on a performance review now? Because I know that's not good over there. It's good. It's good at every other place. He thinks about it for a second and said, no. Because of Facebook, if you get 2 meets most, they put you on a performance improvement plan.
You've been there a year. Then what happens?
So I'm in there a year. Then I get a new manager. He goes on to, right now they're big in this thing called Reels. It's like TikTok, but the Facebook version. So he goes and deals with that. You get a new manager come in, who's a great guy. I got along with him great. He was actually even a little older. Like I said, Facebook was actually getting a little older. He was 50. And we got along.
Oh my God, that's old.
Well, for them, that's right. Still way younger than me, but we got along perfectly. And but the thing is, Mark, getting ready for my next review, he wasn't giving me the stuff that I needed to do to stay at IC4. I'm going to push forward here a little bit because he just kept giving me the stuff that nobody else wanted. For example, I had to certify the dashboards. Everyone's, right? They wanted them all certified. So he gave that to me because all he had to do was make spacing and simple stuff. And then I would do some other bogus thing, but I did it all correctly. A couple of months go by, and all of a sudden I get an email from him. And now I'm getting another manager. He's going somewhere else. Now another manager is going to be coming in. And he says, Howard, you need to look at our matrix so you know what's expected of you as an IC4. Here's the stuff that you need to do. And I'm like, God, man, where's this coming from? Because we talked just last week and you said, I'm dogged in what I do. I mean, I'm a bull. I just keep going and going, keep up the good work. So what happened was, and I'm sure it's from this, is, Zuckerberg, I mean, it's all over the internet when he gave his talk to us, and, people have to perform better. People are here that probably shouldn't be here. I mean, that's very well known. So I took that as they're talking to me. And I'm like, I'm a very competitive person. So I'm not going to let that happen. I'm going to work twice as hard to do what I need to do. So then the new manager comes in and we start working, and he creates this sheet for me of what I have to do. I said, am I on a performance plan? He goes, no. If you were, you'd be speaking to human resources. We just want you to succeed, and I'm going to help you get to this next level. Okay, great. I'm up for that. So I start working on it. And Mark, I'm telling you, I get the first thing I had. He gave me a week to do each one. I did it in 2 hours. I mean, it was easy. And so I show that, and I do another one. Same thing. He goes, man, is it that easy? I'm like, it's what you're giving me stuff that's just easy to do. I don't know how I'm going to maintain this IC4. I'm getting great reviews from the data scientists and the product managers from these projects that I do. I told you I was old school and I did requirements, all that stuff. So now I'm going on almost 2 years and have to get ready for the next performance review. And he said, Howard, I want you to be that IC4. And I said to him, why should I go for a meets all? Why I like to shoot higher. This way I'm shooting higher. If I don't get it, at least I'll be meets all. He says to me, I'll never forget this. He goes, think of it this way. You were a trainer, right? I go, yes. He goes, well, when someone comes into your gym, do you have them lose 20 pounds right away or 5 pounds? All right. So we both laugh. We have a good laugh. So I did everything he asked for, and everything was going great. And then, as you know, they had the layoffs. So I never found out if I would be, if I would have got the meets most.
When did you get laid off?
January 2023.
Here we are. We're recording this the last day in March. What have you been doing since then?
When I got laid off, I thought, I have a story to tell. I think it could be very inspiring and motivational to people and give people hope. And I wanted to tell it. So I wrote a book. I wanted to get that out of the way. Now, I was still sending out resumes to places. At first, I was getting hit hard. People asking me, but these interviews, I had one interview was, code the game Othello. I was like, come on, are you kidding me? So that was the type of stuff I was getting. And then it went dry, nothing. So I published the book, and I'm still got to get a job. So I just recently had 2 interviews today that I think I might get one. But the Facebook name, it goes a long way.
It's interesting. When I got hired at my second startup, I was early 50s. And I remember I'd been out of tech for about 3 years. I went off into high school math for a couple of years, did nonprofit work for a year. And I had a bunch of people at the new startup who were at my previous startup. So I got the interviews and ran the gauntlet. And then they said, come in and talk to the CEO. I said, okay. I talked to Craig, asked him some hard questions that he seemed to like. Then they ushered me into the VP of HR's office, and she starts doing a sales job on me. And I'm going, what? Really? And so I understand where how you felt when you finally got the job.
But let me tell you this. I feel that one of the reasons they brought me on there was because I was an entrepreneur. I was a business person. I thought differently than everybody else. I would push back at times when these people, a lot of them wouldn't, like, why are we doing this? I would ask the questions that needed to be asked. And that's a big part of it. I mean, you can't, there was a very famous quote. Let's see if you know maybe your listeners might know the answer. I don't know. Let's see. Does anyone know who said that young people are just smarter? Right? Think about that.
Mark Z.
Mark knows. Mark Zuckerberg said that. And I agreed with him 100%. I agreed. Because I looked around me. These kids were brilliant. But what they didn't have was life experience.
Yep.
And that's something that can't be taught. Yep. And I hope, I think from me being there, that gave them life and showed them stuff. In fact, this one guy said, he goes, Howard, I'm going to miss you, man. Because the team meetings, they're not going to be as fun without you. Let me say one thing before that. I forgot about something here. I wanted to show you, your listeners, I wanted to tell them about what were some of the age differences. There were two things that really stand out, one especially. But we had this, we talked, it was set up like Facebook basically, right? We would chat and all that. We had like 50 people in our group. And we had a song bot. We called it a song bot. And it would text you, and you would put the song that you're listening to up there. And then people would make comments on it. So I always put up these old songs that no one had any clue what they were. Crosby, Stills and Nash, all the old stuff. And then, remember when James Caan passed away? James Caan, of course. So James Caan passed away. I'm like, I love James Caan. So I put up a picture of James Caan, and I said, rest in peace, Sonny Corleone, right? His most famous part, The Godfather. A kid from the team texts everyone in the group so everyone sees it. He goes, wow, I thought James Caan was only famous for Elf. That he played in the movie. Oh my God. So I text him back. I said, your homework this weekend, you go and watch Godfather Part 1 and Part 2. So you can see how some of the age difference would come in there.
Well, it's funny. When I was at Life Size, I used to, I had a bunch of IT guys who supported me, and they were college students and newly out of college. And their office was just a wreck. It was they had 5 desks in there, and they had cables everywhere. And I used to walk in there, and I'd look at Tony, and I say, Tony, I'm going to call your mama if you don't clean this up. And one of them gave me the best compliment was, wow, he talks to us like we talk to us. So Howard, your real inspiration, if someone wanted to reach out and contact you and buy your book, how might they do that?
If they want to buy the book, they can actually just go on Amazon and just do a search on Facebook's Oldest Intern.
And if someone wanted to contact you?
You can email me at howard@halfhourpower.com or howardwaldstreicher1, the number 1, at gmail.com. And I put that on there.
We'll include that in the show notes. Thank you very much for being on the Repurpose Your Career podcast.
Oh, my pleasure. It was a lot of fun, and it was great talking with you, Mark. And I hope I inspired some of your listeners.
I very much enjoyed Howard's book, and I really related to his story. Take a moment, go to careerpivot.com, sign up for the weekly Career Pivot Insights newsletter, which is sent out every Sunday. You'll get a weekly update on this podcast, white papers, and new blog posts. When you subscribe, you will receive my latest white paper, Ageism, the Last Acceptable Bias. While there, do not forget to check out the Career Pivot community, which can be found at careerpivot.com/community. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Look for Career Pivot on LinkedIn. Thank you for listening all the way to the end of the Repurpose Your Career podcast. You will find all the show notes at careerpivot.com/episode-314. You can also subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Podbeam, Overcast, Spotify, Pandora, Amazon Music, and lots of other places where podcasts can be found. In fact, this podcast can be found on the Repurpose Your Career podcast channel on YouTube. Hope to see you next Monday for another episode of Repurpose Your Career podcast.